G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it.
Welcome, everyone. Today I'm interviewing Matt Lesser from Uniquely Normal. He's based in Auburn, which is near Fort Wayne in the United States of America. Thanks for your time today, Matt.
Glad to be with you. Been looking forward to our time together.
Let's start with how we know each other. Gunnar from Creators Collective put us in touch. Thought you might be a great guest. He sent us a few brilliant guests in the past.
Perfect. Yeah, Gunnar's a good man. I've been working with Gunnar now for just about a year, and I really enjoy him and the work he does.
Tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
You betcha. So I started Uniquely Normal. I actually started it in 2020, but that was I was actually right on the precipice of COVID. So difficult to start a consulting company when it's hard to get in front of people. So that led to then my first client was actually, I was on their board, dear friend. I was coaching him and I was helping him in his business. Rather than me being his consultant, I actually went on his payroll for a year to help him build an executive team. And now July of 2021, I finished my gig with him and went full bore into what I'm doing now. Started out by writing a book, and then as soon as that was published in October of 22, soon began writing my second book, which comes out later this year, and then also focused on client acquisition. So there's a story to this, Troy, of how I got to doing this. It was after years of being in corporate and just got to the end of it and said, I know what, this is the life I want to live. Even though I was making good money and I had good access, I had decent flexibility. I just had enough of living the corporate life.
Right. And maybe give a shout out to both books, the titles of them. We'll link through to them in the show notes.
Yeah, my first book was called Unsatisfied When Less is More. And just a real quick context for that. So I started out my career by taking over our family business, and it was in crisis, but I didn't know it. And I'll be glad to talk about that as we go on. So I had to take the company basically through an organized bankruptcy, and we restarted. And the company restarted with 3 people, me, and I hired my mom and one other person. And over the course of the next 11 years, it grew from 3 people to 180, 1 location to 18, and the thing just took off. And so I had to learn about leadership in a really real and fast way that I did not learn in college. You know, college never taught me, university never taught me, how do you take a business through a bankruptcy? What does it look like to go through that failure? And then what does it look like to grow a business from 3 people to 180 people? I was not equipped for any of that. So I became very passionate very quickly about, what is effective leadership? What's healthy leadership? And that extended to when I sold the business and then went into private equity, began traveling the world and talking with leaders in many different countries, US, Europe, in Africa in particular. But I also had the chance to talk to people in New Zealand and Australia, which is down under in your area. So just really loved working with them. But I started hearing this story, Troy, and I didn't hear it once or twice. I heard it 100 times. And it was these leaders talking to me about them building their businesses. Most of them were owners of their businesses. Most of them were first gen, sometimes second gen. And they reached a point in their life, 50s and 60s usually, where they had invested their life. They'd sacrificed a lot of their life, their free time, their family, to build something that they thought would give them freedom and flexibility and disposable income. They thought it would bring them happiness and joy. And instead, it brought them deep pain and deep sorrow, because what they sacrificed along the way, they realized nearly too late. They sacrificed their marriages, they sacrificed their kids. And so the things they were motivated to build this for wound up being, many of them were alone. Yep. And so I had to write about that, right? So I just kept a journal through my conversations and eventually wrote about it. And that's what Unsatisfied When Less is More is all about. The next book, the follow-on book, is tied to it. It's basically built onto the second one. It's called Unengaged, Building Flourishing Organizations. And it's building upon the first book, but this one is really geared towards leaders of organizations in challenging and encouraging and also equipping them that if they have a desire to build a flourishing organization where the people inside their organization are flourishing, that I give them some practical tools and practices that they can implement in their organization. So sorry, long answer, but those are the 2 books.
That's great, Matt. Yeah, college and universities really shithouse at any education around leadership and management, and especially for small business owners. I think there's scant material or good
Yep.
material out there to help at those two very pivotal levels. So it's great that you've written particularly the second book, but the first book sounds extremely interesting as well, because I hear that a lot as well. Business owners sacrifice too much and their relationships break down from marriage through to their kids. So that's great that you've shone a light on that.
Yeah, thank you.
And so just go back to the family business. Was your family's business that you jumped into?
It was, yeah. So I went to university to study business. I grew up in a business. I mean, my dad bought into a business and wound up buying the guy completely out when I was 4 and 5 years old. And as many families know, when you have a family business, it often dominates the family. Didn't matter holidays, dinners, Sundays, doesn't really matter. We were always talking about the business, sometimes working in the business. And that just was my reality. Sort of working in the business when I was 10 years old. We won't talk about any of the child labor laws, just set that aside.
Same thing for me. I'll send you the podcast I did with my father, but he had a fuel business, a small one. They grew up to a mid-sized business, a distributorship. So when he sold early 2000s, they were selling about 100 million litres a year, 80 million top line, and about 30 team members. But now that you've just said that, I actually remember some of my summer jobs working in the service stations, cleaning windscreens. I reckon I would have started around 10 as well.
Oh, my. We probably have a lot of stories in common, because actually my dad bought into also a fuel distributorship, wholesale distribution. And so he bought into it just prior to the oil embargo crisis of the late 70s and early 80s.
Yep.
So good time to be in it. And the company literally printed money for about 3 or 4 years. And glad it did, because after that, it didn't make money. And many reasons why that didn't happen. So after university, the one thing I didn't want to be is, I knew I didn't want to not go to the university, because my dad made me work all the jobs that he said, if you don't get a college degree, these are the jobs you'll have for the rest of your life. Yep. And so that motivated me to go to university, but I didn't necessarily want to work for him either. But yet out of college, that's where I was. And so a year and a half out of college, I basically had enough, went in to resign. And so I just said, Dad, this isn't working. One of us needs to go, but you own the stock. So I'm assuming it's not going to be you. So I'm leaving, and I'm going to go to graduate school, and I'm going to just figure out a different path in life. And I'll never forget the conversation. He literally said, sit down. And so I did. And he said, he says, I'm leaving. And so he divorced my mom. They'd been married for 29 years at that point. And he left me. I'm the oldest of 3 boys. So he left the business to me, literally signed it over to me. And he moved 1,200 miles away. And one of those things, Troy, that school actually came quite easy to me. And so therefore I thought that meant life would too. Heck, I went to business school, right? So business should come easy. Well, I got a serious dose of reality. And within 3 months of taking over, I began to discover problem after problem. First thing I uncovered was trade debt that totaled over $1 million USD. And this is a company that in a good year would net 300 USD. So, you're talking 3 to 4 years of net profit that had accumulated. I didn't know it, but my dad had taken the money out. And then the second thing was we had several convenience stores. So you mentioned gas stations, fueling stations. We had those as well. And a couple of them had leaking underground tanks, and they were polluting neighboring properties. And the US EPA gets pretty grumpy about that. Yeah. So literally, the way that I had to resolve that is I literally just handed the keys over and said, I don't have any money. I can't clean it up. So you can take me to court all you want, but I don't have any money. And so I said, here's the deed of the properties. You got them. And then the third one was a big one. And that is he didn't pay withholding tax, and the IRS will have their money. And so they were threatening criminal prosecution of me, because even though it wasn't my doing, they didn't care. It was my name on the bottom line now. So that all turned into I got really, really sick emotionally. I spiraled into a deep clinical depression. I got to the point of wanting to end my life. And that's where literally miracle after miracle began to happen, Troy. And I won't go into all the details, and we only have a short time together, but suffice it to say that there was a local businessman, very successful, very wealthy, that knew of what was going on. My mom contacted him when she found out that I was as bad as I was. I was trying to do my best to hide it from her and my bride, who I just married, literally a year prior. And so I was removed from the business. I got professional help, was heavily medicated for a while just to try to rebalance everything. And while I was out for about 6-7 months, he brought a team of people in to see what we had. And we had enough to restart. And so as I got out of professional treatment, I was able to come back in the business. We relaunched it under a new name. We were able to, obviously we had to satisfy the debt with the IRS. They will have their money. Yeah. And we were also able to get a couple of our key suppliers to go with us. And I retooled the business, got rid of focusing on fuel and got into heavy oil. And then later on got into quick lubes. So those are the fast oil changes for vehicles. And then, we were literally off to the races. The company grew by leaps and bounds. And by the time I sold it about 11 years later, it had grown from 3 people to 180, and we had 17 locations all around our state. And so it really was a fun ride. Challenging, don't get me wrong. The challenges change, but I should write a book on things I learned during that time, but it was a great experience.
Well, Matt, that is quite a journey, and well done for making it all the way through that, the fortitude mentally to be able to, and a lot of people don't talk about it, but the fact that you actually went and got professional help is amazing and quite rare, I think. So yeah, well done.
Thank you. Part of it wasn't necessarily, I wasn't thinking straight, quite frankly. And I talk about this a lot, the importance of having wise counsel around you and a mentor that understood. And he was the one who said, dude, you're not thinking and you need help. I'm going to get you some help. And I'm glad he did, because I was in a position where literally I had difficulty tying my shoes. I was not thinking straight at all. And I'm not exaggerating either. I mean, literally there were days it's like, okay, I can't remember how to tie my shoes. It was that bad.
Yeah. And what year did you jump into the business and how old were you?
It was 1990. I graduated from university in 95, and I had worked in the business in some shape or form all through college, high school and college. And then after I graduated, so in 95, I began working full time. So it was 97. I joined in late 95. After this, I took the summer off and traveled, did some other things. And so it was early to mid 97 where all of this took place.
Yep. Right. And how old were you then?
I was 24 years old. Not quite.
Yeah, right. Great. Both born in the same year, 1973.
Yes, I was. 73. Yes, sir. Day after Christmas, man.
Well, about a month before you. Yeah, wow. Very similar journey then. I haven't gone through your father put you through, but that is just phenomenal. Wow. Any other key numbers you're happy to share to illustrate the growth of the business? We've mentioned the FTE. That's just phenomenal growth going from, you started, I think, at one site up to 17. And I must say also, genius move to change strategically out of main fuel to the heavy oils. I think that was very, very smart.
Yeah, honestly, it was one of those things where it just made sense. I wish I could say that I had this brilliant plan, but it was one of those where I was looking around the industry, and in order to, the way that the fuel industry was at that time, I mean, you had to be a mega distributor. And where I was located in the States, I just didn't have that kind of volume or even access to it. But yet where I was located too, there was no other real competitors in the heavy oil space. And so it just made sense. And I didn't necessarily have a strategic plan to get into the quick lube side, so get into the retail downstream. But 3 of my largest customers were quick lubes or the fast oil change places. And I had competition that was moving in from the area that were going to buy them, and I would have lost the supply. And so it was a defensive measure. I bought them instead. And then that led to then a joint venture, and I bought 14 more several years later. And so that was a ride in itself, man. I love the wholesale side. In fact, I often joke today that the retail side that's beat your head against the wall. But we figured some stuff out, man. We really did. And we took care of our customers and our employees. And so from a top line side, when we rebooted the business, I think our first year in business, we did about 750, 800,000 USD. And by the time we sold it on the wholesale side, it was about 16 million USD. On the retail side, that was an additional 8 to 9. So that's where the companies had grown substantially.
That's phenomenal, Matt. Well done.
It was a team, my friend. It really was a team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're going to get into that in a minute. I'm really keen to hear, particularly around the people side of things and your learnings, so the audience can get out of that. When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
Oh my, I struggle with that to this day, quite frankly. It depends on how you define success. I have had to redefine that over the years. In my younger years, I thought it was about making money and it was about growing a business. And then after I achieved that, and then I went into the world of private equity after I sold my business, and I got to travel the world, and I thought that was pretty sexy, and I thought that was success. And I'm a very hard worker and I get results. And so I got good salaries and I got good bonuses, and I thought that was success. But here's what was happening in my life. At the same time I was having these conversations with these leaders who were selling these businesses, I had the same struggle in my own life. I have 3 kids, and I was gone a lot, and I missed a lot with them growing up. And so I'm having these conversations with these leaders, and it was almost like I'm looking in the mirror at myself saying, dude, what the hell are you doing? You're missing your own family growing up. And for what? For money? And so over the last few years in particular, the last 5 specifically, I have been redefining what success is for me. And it honestly has nothing to do with money. It has to do with impact. It has to do with influence. It has to do with making a difference in people's lives. And so I will tell you that right now in my new business, I am making less money right now than I've ever made in my career. And I am more satisfied, I am more joyful, and I am more content than I ever have been. And it doesn't make any freaking sense, but it's the truth.
That's great. That's fantastic. So that you've answered the next question, what success looks like to you back then and now, which is great. Before I forget though, have you read the book Maverick by Ricardo Semler?
You know, you're the second person now who's told me I need to read that, but I have not. I need to read that.
Oh, it is a great fucking book. I read that probably 25 years ago. Industrial, he's Brazilian, a similar story. His father wanted him to take over the business. He didn't want to, just want to play guitar and, muck around. And eventually he could see also his father was an autocrat, the dictator within his business, and didn't like that style. So it's just a phenomenal book. Similar though, that conversation went, it's either one of us has got to go, and his father said, all right, well, I'm going to go away for a year. You make any change you want, I'll be back in a year. I'm going to travel. And the day he left, Ricardo brought in the old stuffy board members and fired each and every one of them. And then just documents in this book a great journey of everything they tried, failed. They grew like nothing else with hyperinflation in Brazil at the same time. This is the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. But the takeaways that I took from that book were things like just the mindset of perpetual learning, trying, failing, building the team out, and having, humble leadership. It was just a phenomenal book written in the late 80s, I think it was. I'll shoot it through to you after this. It's a great book.
I'd appreciate that. Said you're the second person now that's recommended that to me, like in the past 2 weeks. So I'm familiar with it. So yeah, I definitely need to pick it up.
Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast growing business?
Get good people. The one thing that I am grateful for is that we had some amazing people that came at just the right time. And again, I wish I could say that I had this brilliant recruiting plan and this brilliant hiring plan, but it was just one of those things when we needed the right person. And, like God had this, orchestrating this whole plan, and I didn't know anything about it, but we had just the right person came along. And so we were able to build an amazing team, especially a leadership team. That's the one key that I would say. Get a key leadership team around you. And even in my current business, where it's literally 1.5 of us, I have a board of directors. And I started out as my personal board. It's now become my business board of directors. These are 4 people that love me, that serve me, that know me, and they're just as likely to pat me on the back and encourage me as they are to poke me in the chest and say, dude, get your head out of your ass. And we meet every quarter, and I don't compensate them. They do this willingly. I just went to them and said, hey, here's what I'm trying to build. Here's my vision. Here's my idea. I have no idea if it's going to work or not. But, I've been doing this basically for 20 years. And I heard one too many times, Troy, that, hey, you should just go do that on your own. Well, I heard that too many times and decided, okay, what the heck, let's go do this. And I think some days it's a great idea, and some days I still wonder if I made the right choice. But I'm really having a good time. So
that's great.
The key is get good people.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It is hard. It's lonely at the top, which is great that you've got those board members around you, the mentors, helping, especially in the tough days. That's good.
Oh yeah.
And how did you fund the business? The family business obviously was uniquely funded, let's call it. I had Carolee Fontanelli on episode 71, 2.5 years ago now. Wonderful Kiwi lady that moved to Australia, did a law degree, started working in her husband's solo one-person law firm, realised, and then he left, but at the same time left the marriage, but also left the business with $500,000 in debt. So she started $500,000 in the red, but managed to pay that off in 3 years. And that, I thought that was a phenomenal story. But it sounds like what you've been through funding wise, walking into that mess, I think it's topped Carolee's story.
Yeah, it was a mess. I will tell you that because of the past company, I was taken to court. I can't tell you how many times. At one point I can't remember what that number was, a lot. And literally I had an amazing attorney, and he would always request a sidebar with the opposing attorney. We would go into a side room, and literally my attorney would just say, tell your story. And so I would share much of what I've shared with you, and I'd share that with the opposing side. And I will tell you, in all cases, and this is the weird thing, in every single case, they dropped the case.
Wow.
Everyone. And so what we did is, because we felt responsible still, over the course of time, we repaid as many of those debts as we could. Even though we didn't have to, we did. So the gentleman who helped me, he did give us a small loan in order to pay off the IRS, and then give us a little bit of working capital to be able to show some good faith to our supplier that we're good for it. And then he also agreed to underwrite part of it in case we didn't make it, but we did. And so we were able to pay him back. And I think it was about a year or year and a half, we were able to repay him fully. And from then on out, we got some bank financing and we were off to the races. So from there forward, it was basically traditional financing, bank financing. But it started out with a small loan from him to get us going.
That's great. And you didn't take any investors along the way?
We did not.
No. Fantastic.
But we reached a point where the business had grown to the point, Troy, where I literally had to decide. It reached an inflection point. Okay, if we're going to go the next level and we want to swing for the fences, so to speak, we're going to have to leverage everything we got and or take on investors. And rather than doing that and potentially risking everything and all the lives that we're responsible for, one of the things we did as a business, and we did it very well, is we knew how to build relationships. And we built relationships with our employees, our customers, and our competitors. And so we went to our two largest competitors and said, listen, you know who we are, you know what we've been doing, you know what we're up to, and we're exiting. And, are you interested? And so our two largest competitors were interested, and one of them bought one side of the company and another competitor bought the other side. And so it just worked out.
That's great. And if you were there for 11 years, started in 97, so was that 2008 you exited?
Yep. It was actually late 7, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that's perfect timing just before the GFC.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I've often said that if that thing had been delayed by probably 6 or 8 months, I'm not sure what would have happened.
No, geez. Wow. This one's going to be an odd question for you. Answer it either the family business or your current business. If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
My current one, I absolutely would. The oil industry, even though I loved what I did, I think that it's run its course for me. And now if there's ample funding and I could go in at a different level, I would consider it, but I just don't know. In fact, part of it is because of the regulations that have occurred and then the huge crackdown right now on carbon fuels. I just don't know that I want to be in that mess right now.
Yeah.
But what I'm doing in my current business with leadership development and consulting and speaking and writing, this is something I've been passionate about. And literally, I felt called to do this since I was 15 years old. There's a whole story with that. So right now, I feel like I'm pursuing what my passion and what I've been called to do since I was literally a teenager. Yeah. And I'm absolutely loving what I'm doing.
This one, I'm assuming it's going to come from the family business. Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so audience can learn from it?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to the first one, and that is through my deep depression and literally feeling like I was all alone, even though I was surrounded by my new wife or my only wife, but we were relatively newly married. And my mom was there, my little brother was there, but yet I felt all alone. And I hated that feeling. I got to the point, literally, I felt helpless and hopeless. And it was the hopeless part that drove me to start thinking irrationally. Anytime you start thinking about ending your own life, you've crossed the point of rational thought. And I was there. I had stopped functioning. And that was tough, man. Those were some dark, dark, dark months. And I never want to go back through that. I mean, people ask me, if you had to go through it again, would you? And the answer on this side of it is I absolutely would, because it fundamentally changed two things in my life. It changed my mindset and it changed my core motivation. And my mindset, prior to that, my wife would tell you that when she married me, she knew exactly what she was getting. She would say an overconfident, cocky person. And really what she meant is I was getting this arrogant, cocky SOB. But yet she was okay with it because she knew it. After my depression, a lot of those edges were gone. In fact, I actually went the opposite way for a long time. I had difficulty making decisions even. But today, what I realize now, the importance of having other people around you. And whereas in the beginning, I thought I could do it all on my own, right? I thought I knew enough. I thought I could do it all myself. And I realized what a lie that was. And I think that's the first. The second one is a lesson I'm learning even in these last 2 years. And that is the power of belief and the power of faith, that just keep being persistent and being consistent and keep moving forward one day at a time, one step at a time. And you see progress and you see growth. When I started this business in July of 2021, I talked to a lot of people, a lot of good friends and other acquaintances I met along the way. Just say, hey, tell me about how your business got started and how long before you saw growth. And almost all of them said, as long as you can survive, when they meant financially, for 2 years, you'll start to see things happen. But I'll tell you, those 2 years, they're freaking hard, man. It's hard when you're working your tail off and you're writing and doing this and doing that, and you're seeing nothing come in. But then it's exciting as you start to see things trickle in. So those are probably my two most difficult moments.
Yeah, just on constancy on my desk, I've got a little quote here, one of my favorites, Benjamin Disraeli, ex-British Prime Minister. The secret of success is constancy of purpose. You won't be able to see that because my thing's blurred out, but it's one of my favorite quotes. Keep on trucking.
Oh man, consistent. You said what? Constancy is
The secret of
consistency of
success.
purpose.
Yeah, the secret of success is constancy of purpose.
Constancy of purpose. I got to remember that one. That's a good one.
Find it hard to define a clear strategy, then communicate it and execute it alongside the rest of your team? Or you currently don't work a simple quarterly strategic plan to boost your team's performance? Our Business Growth Formula online course is perfect for small business owners with 5 to 30 team members wanting to grow. We share the mindsets, habits and tools to be a legendary leader in your business. growsmallbusiness.com.
What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
Shared leadership and really understanding what that is. Like I said in the beginning, I was very much about me and myself and I, thinking that I could do it on my own, and realizing very quickly, especially as business, both as it failed and as it grew, you can't do it alone. And you've got to learn the importance in business of shared leadership. If you have a desire, if you don't have a desire for your business to grow, that's one thing. You can do it all yourself, right? And you're going to reach a point where you're just capped. But if you have a desire to see it grow and make a bigger impact, then you have to figure out how to share leadership, how to become very effective at delegation, how to be very effective at empowering people. And really, my next book is really all about that. And it's taking a look at 3 basic pillars of building a business. And they're the 3 pillars that I've had to learn throughout my career. And that is becoming empathetic. So empathy, empowerment, and excellence. And the importance of building those 3 core foundations into your business to grow it. And those are 3 things. Again, I didn't learn that in business school. I learned that by doing it by trial and error, a whole lot of error, a whole lot of failures, a whole lot of bad decisions. But now those are the 3 pillars I would build any business on.
Have you read any of Jim Collins' books, Built to Last, Good to Great?
Oh my goodness.
Genius.
Sure have.
So I think it was Built to Last where he put one of his main thesis out there with level 5 leadership. A lot of that's around humility and empathy.
Yep, absolutely.
What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
Boy, that's a really good question. The least about fast growth, how to maintain your levels of excellence. We always had a very high commitment to customer service and excellence in everything we did. And the faster you grow, the easier it is to make mistakes. The easier it is to sacrifice excellence in order to go faster. And so it was learning how to maintain our levels of excellence and maintain our commitment to relationships. I mean, when you're servicing 100 customers, that's one thing, but when you're servicing 10,000 customers, that's a whole nother ballgame. And so how do you maintain your relational aspect that got you the growth to begin with and got you the trust to begin with when you're now managing 10 times the number of customers? I mean, it's a big challenge. And honestly, it goes right back to leadership. You have to make sure you're hiring the right people, that you're training them, you're onboarding them properly, and then you're empowering them with the same passions and the same focuses and the same commitments that you have, and transferring those to the people that are with the customers every day. I mean, one person just can't be with all the customers anymore.
Yep. I'm looking forward to getting to the people questions in a moment, because that is incredible growth over 11 years, going from 3 to 180 people and managing that level of excellence, continued excellence and success. Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. What do you love most about growing a small business?
I love the day-to-day challenge. I love, trying to figure out, I love the day-to-day differences. I mean, no day is the same. And so one day you're doing one thing, the next day you're doing something else. And it's just trying to figure out the strategy, trying to figure out what's my messaging, what's my niche, what's my focus going to be. I just think I love the growth stage of a business. It's difficult from a financial point of view, but quite frankly, I find it the most fun. Yeah. And it might sound kind of weird, but I just enjoy those challenges.
I'm exactly the same. Just love the growing stage. Once it gets to, a bit of a plateau and there's not much more growth there, or gets too large, I don't like businesses over 30 team members. Yeah, it's so much fun.
Yep, it is.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
Realizing, accepting, and embracing that I need people, that I have to have people around me, and realizing I can't do it alone and I don't want to do it alone. One of the hardest things, honestly, about starting over on my own is that I'm on my own.
Yep.
And so when I had a really good mentor that said, don't do it alone, and he was the one who painted a picture for me about having a personal board. I mean, I didn't ask twice. I was like, yep, that's exactly what I need. I'm in. 30 years ago, even 20 years ago, I just said, what? That's ridiculous. Who needs that kind of crap? And because I don't want to be alone. I want and I need people around me.
Do you have a vision for the number of team members you want to grow Uniquely Normal to?
I would love to get to the place where I have between 12 and 15. And then from there, I'm kind of like you. Once it gets above a certain level, I love to be able to touch and to have relationship with each of my employees, touch their lives, have an impact, get to know their families and all that stuff. And once you get above that, it's more and more difficult. I wouldn't object if it got to 25 or 30. It requires a different leadership structure, and I'm fine with that. But beyond that, I'd have to really think about it. This stage of my life, I don't know. I guess some of it depends on what comes my way, I guess.
The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
He or she has to figure out how to take care of themselves. You have to come up with I call it a sustainable rhythm. You have to figure out a sustainable rhythm. It's not the case anymore. It used to be this way where people that were working 70, 80, 90, 100 hours a week, people would they'd be put on a pedestal, right? And it's like, oh man, look at them. They're sacrificing everything. That doesn't work. All it does is lead to burnout. It leads to broken marriages. It leads to broken relationships. It doesn't work. And so when I'm coaching executives today or coaching leaders, one of the first conversations I have with them is, what is your sustainable rhythm? And that means, how are you working 40 to 50 hours a week? No more. How are you taking care of yourself physically, your health? Are you getting sleep? Are you getting exercise? Are you getting time off? Are you spending time meditating? How are you separating work from home? Are you still dating your wife? Are you spending one-on-one time with your kids? How are you involved in your community? Are you involved in a church or a community group or nonprofit? How are you involved outside of the business? Because if all I hear is, oh yeah, I spend 80 to 100 hours at work, and I don't exercise, and I'm 100 pounds overweight, and blah, blah. It's like, man, you're killing yourself.
Yep.
For what? For money? So sustainable rhythm is my answer.
And the longest running study on happiness, I think it was Harvard. It's been going for 80 years. I'm not sure if you've seen this. They'd go back and survey people every couple of years. But the conclusion is the thing that brings the greatest happiness is relationships. It's not obviously not material things, money. It's whether it's romantic relationships or your friendships, etc. Healthy relationships is what the number one thing that makes people happy.
Absolutely.
All right, the big one here. Can you talk how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
One of the things that I'm a huge proponent of today, and again, learn this from making too many errors in it, is hire slow and fire fast. Unfortunately, when you have a high growth business, you have opportunities, you have openings that open up, people leave, people go, people quit suddenly or whatever. All of a sudden you have openings, you need them filled, you get desperate. And so rather than having a methodical approach that is documented and following that approach, even though you might have 5 openings that you have to fill, it's being very disciplined in your hiring and going through the whole approach, making sure that they are, I even think it's more important to find out, are they going to be a cultural fit in this organization? Because if they don't have the attitude or the commitment to the culture that you're trying to build, it doesn't matter if they're the best equipped skills-wise for the job, because if they got an attitude problem or they're not going to fit in your culture or they don't buy in or believe in what you're trying to do, don't hire them. Yeah. I don't care if they're the best qualified person on the planet. Don't hire that person because they're going to be a cancer inside of your organization. So those are the things that I've learned. And when you hire somebody and you realize you've made a mistake, and you mentioned Jim Collins, right person on the bus, right seat on the bus.
Yep.
If you hire somebody that's on the bus and they're in the wrong seat and you cannot find them a seat, just be honest and have a conversation with the person. People aren't stupid.
No.
They see it too. And it's just sitting down and saying, hey, you know what? I screwed up. Let me help you succeed someplace else. However you want to help that person exit your team gracefully.
Yeah, that whole warm body syndrome. I was having that conversation last night with an ex-girlfriend. She's the CFO of a large construction business down here in Tasmania, civil works, etc. And yeah, she's just got in there a few months ago and they're under-resourced. And with the labour shortage at the moment, and we're a small island down here, 500,000 people. And I was trying to encourage her not to just accept the one candidate that the recruiters put forward and to be very, very sure and go slow because she's seen it before and she's been through it. She just needs to be reminded. It's going to be painful if you just take anyone with a pulse.
Absolutely. But it gets scary as time goes on, especially and you're still shorthanded and your good employees are covering by working extra hours and they're getting a little disgruntled. I mean, I get it, man. The pressure just mounts.
Yeah. What are some of the things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
I think that one of the key things that you have to do is you have to figure out how to successfully and thoroughly onboard your people when they come on board. And what I mean that is, even though you might have an open role that's been open for a while, taking the time to making sure that when you hire people, they understand not just the what or the how, but the why of the organization. The more that people understand the why, they understand why, number one, why the organization exists, why it's important that this organization exists, and what it is trying to do in the world, not just make money, beyond making money. And then they understand their role in the organization and how they're contributing to the whole. That is so key. Once you have an employee or team member that understands that, I mean, you've got a team member that will be more productive, more engaged, and you've got a team member that is more than likely going to be with you for a longer period of time than those that don't understand the why. And so I think that's key. I think it's important to have performance optimization measures that are robust, that you're giving feedback as real time as possible. I've made this statement before, but I believe the annual performance review is broken. I don't think it works.
Totally agree.
And so you have to get people as close to point of impact and as close as soon as it happens. The worst thing I think that happens in organizations, and I think this hurts cultures, is where you have a face-to-face meeting with an employee for the first time, and for the first time they realize that you're not happy with them, the performance sucks or whatever. They should go into those meetings fully knowing what to expect. And then I think there should be an aspect of sharing. And I mean, sharing in everything, sharing in the successes, sharing in the hard times, sharing in the big wins, celebrating, taking time to celebrate, having performance optimization that is aligned with the values of the organization, having compensation and everything, bonuses, the whole 9 yards, that's aligned to what's important to the why, that supports the why of the organization, not just the money part.
Yeah.
It's got to get beyond money.
Yeah, Simon Sinek's Why, his TED Talk of, I don't know, nearly 20 years ago now. It's one of the most watched TED Talks. It's amazing. Uses Apple as the case study there and speech as well. Yeah, it's great. A few points you just made there, totally agree. I think a lot of business owners miss an excellent opportunity, that old saying, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. A lot of owners are too busy, air quotes, running their business to just sit down the new team member. And I like the fact you call them team members, not employees, by the way. A new team member, take them out for coffee on their first day, mid-morning. They've had some time to read some material and then go through your checklist. But particularly, like you said, going through the why, as well as the history, and then talk about them and their role and their background as well. That is 1 hour investment. And I did it at Australia's first craft distillery, basically, based here in Tasmania. It's been going for 31 years now. I think I was the first CEO when the family sold out, and I did it with every single team member, even if they were casuals behind the bar. We got up to about 30 team members, full-time equivalents from memory. Wow. And the feedback I got after I left, that time that I invested with those people just made a huge difference for them, not just their understanding, but certainly their engagement in the workplace, and really enjoying and knowing that myself and the rest of the management team were there to support them, and not a phrase I made up, manage by exception. We only talk about things when people make a mistake, which is very disheartening for a team member.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love what you said there about the owner being involved. I mean, smaller organizations, I think it's absolutely critical that the owner meets and interacts with each team member. Obviously, the bigger the organization, that may not be as feasible. And that's why I highly recommend that they video and audio capture the heart of the founder, the heart of the founding team member, or the current executive team if the team member original is gone. So they understand the why, and they understand the reason behind the formation of the company and what it's out to do. I just think that's critically important. You're building relationships. And I think that leaders sometimes forget, especially again, as the organizations get larger, it gets harder, but just realizing that every day that it's about people. You know, organizations are people, and the organizations sell to, guess what, other people. So it's all about people. And let's just remember the people aspect in everything that we do.
Tell our audience how you've handled balance, Matt.
I've handled it better at times and not so good at times. So that's one of the major lessons I've learned, and I'm doing it differently now than I ever have. When I had my own business and it was growing, a family business, and it was growing so rapidly, I was out of whack. I was out of balance. When I went into private equity and I was busy traveling the world, I was out of balance. My family took the biggest hit, and they'll tell you that. And that was one of the hardest, most difficult lessons of my life. And I had this big epiphany when my oldest son was getting ready to graduate from high school. And literally, we were literally going through, boxes of photos, getting ready for his, big celebration. And literally, I would pull out a photo and say, "Well, when was this?" And I couldn't take it. I mean, literally, I sat there and I wept. I was in tears because I realized that I had missed so many moments of my oldest boy's life, and this is just not worth it to me anymore. And so now I will say my office is in my home. That took 2 years. That basically has taken these last 2 years for my wife and I get used to that, but we're in a pretty good place right now. but it's being willing to say, okay, you know what? I know I have another 3 hours of work to do, but my youngest boy just got home from school and I'm going to spend the next 2 hours with him. I'll get to it when he goes to bed or whatever. And so it's just I've had to learn how to reprioritize based on my core values in life and not based upon some external demand that was trying to dictate my core values.
Yep. And how much professional development have you invested in yourself? Sounds like it would have been quite a lot.
Yeah, a lot. I did go back and get an MBA at some point. And so in 2009, I did that. So several years after university, 2010, sorry, I graduated. And I love studying people, studying assessments in particular. I'm a huge fan of using assessments in a healthy way. I know they can be used in a very unhealthy way. And so I've pursued licensing and certification, I think in 15 or 16 different leadership instrument tools over the years. And I'm always looking for ways to add to my own learning and knowledge. I'm a self-proclaimed lifelong learner and grower. And I want to do that the day I die. I read anywhere from 50 to 100 books a year. I just want to continue to learn and grow.
That's great. Anything else on mentors or coaches?
Yeah, get one. They're critical. I believe that no matter.
Sorry, look, people don't realize just how giving mentors are of their time. Like you've said earlier, so you just need to ask them, and they'll take them out for lunch or a coffee or a beer once a month, and they're happy to give their experience, their mistakes, and their 2 cents.
Absolutely. I wouldn't be who I am today or where I am today if it weren't for people. Most of them were older, anywhere by a factor of 10 to 20 years older than me, experienced businessmen, lawyers, accountants, bankers that saw potential in me. And when I would say, hey, to your point, can I buy a cup of coffee? Can I buy you lunch? Can I buy you a beer? And we sit down and have a chat. And the amount of knowledge that I got there, I mean, literally, I probably earned a PhD just in their knowledge bestowed upon me. And I cannot emphasize it enough. Have a mentor. You know, I mentioned my personal board now. There's 3 men, and my wife is the 4th person. I asked her to join, and it made the other guys uncomfortable for a minute, just getting used to that. But I'll tell you now, it's amazing just having access to those 4 people who speak into my life at times I needed. I mean, there was a time, literally right after my first book came out in October, I went through a real lull. And to the point that, you know, I was doubting what I was doing. And for about a month and a half, I was going to quit and basically say, screw this, I'm done. It was a great shot, but I'm just going to get a job and do whatever. And to a person, they all told me, we had our meeting in early December of last year. And to a person, they all said, you're not quitting. And here's why.
Yeah.
And that's the power of having mentors and coaches in your life. They can help you not just learn, but also help you through those times when you're like, you know what? I quit.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you've got a board of directors now. I assume you had one with the family business as well. Anything else on that or advice for the audience on boards?
No, I did highly recommend. And make sure you have defined criteria that you're looking for when you ask people to serve.
And you're one of the few we've had on that's exited a business, both operationally and financially. You got any advice for the audience thinking about exiting one day?
Yeah. Realize that if it's your business, it's going to be much more difficult than you think it'll be. It'll be much more emotional than you think it'll be. And it'll probably take much longer than you think it will. And that's all okay. And I encourage people that are thinking about going through an exit, especially a family business, is first of all, make sure the whole family's on board with it. And number 2, give yourself permission to grieve. Because it's like a piece of you. It's like a piece of your family. I mean, it took me a long time to separate to realize who I am, my own identity, apart from that business, because I was a part from the very beginning. And I actually went back into counseling. I got therapy again to help me sort through, okay, I know who I was in the business. Now that part of me is gone. I'm now working for somebody else, which is something I'd only done one at a time in my life. And I don't know who this person is over here. And I needed help, and I knew it. And so it's okay to say, I need help.
Yep, that's all great advice. Thanks, Matt. We're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
People. It's always people. And I say that, I laugh about it, but I mean it. It's finding the right people that can come alongside you, that get your vision, that will support you and be with you and help you grow it.
Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
It's not a traditional business book, but it was one that helped me understand people more. I can't give you just one. It has to give you 2. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yep,
Stephen Covey.
Yep.
And Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Group. Those 2 books I recommend. I mean, there's absolutely tons of books out there that are wonderful books, but those are 2 that I recommend to any leader in particular.
Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
I often listen to thought leaders when it comes to anything to do with leadership or whatever. I don't necessarily have one in particular because I often will just search by leadership topic. And so when I come across a leadership topic that I'm interested in, then I want to hear what other people have to say.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
I think I'd have to go back to a mentor or a coach.
Yeah.
And I know that's not necessarily a tool, it's a person, but having a mentor or coach that's available to you. I've often told people that are starting businesses or whatever, especially again, family businesses, is that you need a good attorney, you need a good accountant, and you need a good banker, and you need a good coach. So those four people, if you can find them, will really, really help you in learning business and getting going.
Finally, my favorite question. What would you tell yourself on day one of starting out 26 years ago?
I would say worry less, have less anxiety, enjoy the journey. For me, the journey at times was laborious and I made it more difficult than it needed to be. I worried more than I should have. I had more anxiety than I needed to have. And I wish I would have relaxed more along the journey and just enjoyed the journey rather than always going so quickly from point A to point B that I missed the scenery along the way. I think I had a lot less regret and a lot less heartache, especially when it came to relationships that I either set aside or I missed out on a lot, especially regarding my wife and kids. You know, that's time I can't get back. Okay. And I'm almost 50 years old now and I can't get back any of that time. So I can't change the past, but what I can do is I can change me now going forward. And so if you're just starting out, learn to enjoy the journey now and learn to enjoy the people that are around you because businesses come and go, businesses grow. What I have found is that it doesn't really matter if I'm working 60 hours a week or 40, those additional 20 hours are usually so much less productive that I've been better off taking time off.
Totally agree. On worrying too much, it reminds me of my favorite Mark Twain quote. I've had many troubles in my life, some of which actually happened. My second favorite Mark Twain quote is, the more I get to know people, the more I like my dog.
I love both of those.
Yeah, they're great. I've actually got my chocolate Labrador Carlton supporter. It's a football team here in Australia. He's got a little jersey on the couch behind me, snoring his head off. So, yeah, it's a great saying. Matt, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Well, we could talk for a few more hours, I'm sure. Phenomenal journey and growth, and well done on the turnaround, both personally and also with the business and all the great things you're doing with other business owners out there. Just amazing, taking the business out of bankruptcy, the family business. But if you've been left with such a mess, going from 3 to 180 people in 11 years, selling it off and having 17 sites, that is just phenomenal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I've enjoyed our conversation immensely, and I agree. We go on and on. So I really appreciate being on your program.
Well, look forward to having a beer with you down here in Tasmania and talking business some more.
I would love that. Count me in. I'll be there.
We're getting some great iTunes reviews. For those listening, please pop over to your podcast app and leave us a review.